So Peter, what's the value of new media and social networking for employees? Why should corporations and CEOs encourage employees to engage in this activity?
It would be great to see CEOs who do encourage employees to engage in this activity. I don't think enough CEOs understand it and not enough encourage their employees to engage. But let me just step back a little bit. I think there is definitely a change happening in how companies and their workforce interact with each other. So who is an employee anymore? Again, I'm going to use Allstate as an example. We have agents that, if you're an Allstate customer, that you deal with, who are independent business people in their own right, so they're not employees, but they represent Allstate. Those agents have their own employees. Again, they wear an Allstate badge, they have an Allstate t-shirt. As far as you're concerned, they're what's the difference between them and somebody who's really an employee? When you pick up the phone and you call an 800 number, you might get to a call center in the US and it might have Allstate employees there, real employees, or it might have contract employees who work for some other company but are acting on behalf of Allstate. And as far as you're concerned, that's Allstate. But the call center may be in the Philippines or in India, and you're still dealing from your point of view with Allstate. So when you think about the organization and the folks who make the delivery of its strategy possible, that's just not just it always just used to be employees, I think, for most companies. Now it's not employees anymore. The whole workforce, the nature of the workforce has changed considerably. So that means that for a company, how you communicate with all of those people and how you get them all to understand your mission and your vision and how they might participate in it and what's in it for them, that also has to change, right? And particularly if there's no direct line of reporting relationship, then you can't mandate. It can't be command and control, even if you thought that command and control was a good idea, which I don't. So that's, I think, a really big change that's happened in the last few years. There are other big changes. The changing of the demographic profile of most companies' workforces is dramatic. As us baby boomers are beginning to roll off the scene and Gen X's and Gen Y's come in to replace us, now you have way different expectations. A Gen Xer has a completely different expectation than a baby boomer does about how they're going to relate to the organization that they're going to work for, whether it's as an employee or a contractor or in whatever capacity. And they have expectations that they're very definite about. And if those expectations aren't met, they're going to go somewhere else. So the old post-World War II command and control structure inside organizations, I think, is changing very rapidly, or if it's not, it has to. Organizations have to make the changes because they're going to lose their competitive edge otherwise. So what's replacing command and control? Well, dialogue is replacing command and control. It's not just top-down anymore. It's top-down and bottom-up and ideally across as well. And social media is a wonderful enabler of that strategic change which has to happen. Other things are as well. How managers relate to their teams can't just be command and control if you really want to maximize the potential of the workforce. So I think you have to see social media in a broader context. It gives us lots of wonderful toys to play with, but there has to be a reason to play with the toys. And the reason, I think, inside the employee workforce environment inside a company is because it enables a different style of management. It's a style of management where there's much more involvement and participation at all levels of the organization, where leading can come from anywhere inside that team. Anybody can have a voice and make a contribution. And you're expected to. You can't just wait now until be told what to do. People want you to put your hand up and say, we should be doing this, and then to lead that opportunity. So social media is a great tool to enable that to happen. The only caveat that I would throw into that, though, I think and I've thought a lot about this, and at Gagan McDonald we do a lot in this area. you can't impose inside a culture something that the culture is going to spit out. So the introduction of social media can be a great leader of culture change inside an organization, but you can't impose something that is so radically different from the existing culture that that culture spits it out. That won't work. In fact, that's a dangerous thing, because then all the potential power of the social media inside the organization, it gets lost forever. People say, well, we tried that and it didn't work, and it wasn't us, so we're never going to do it again. So we don't think that you can have a revolution inside your internal communication system just through introducing social media. It's got to be an evolution which is staged and appropriate to the existing culture, but is a leader of culture change and a leader of employee engagement.
Let's talk a minute about a code of ethics. Are companies' values different from a code of ethics? Do you see a difference between them? There's a little bit of discussion going on between corporate values and really identifying and describing those values, and those who rely on a set code.
Yes, well, a code of ethics is worth about the value of the paper on which the code of ethics is printed.
Okay.
Even assuming that the code of ethics that piece of paper has been put up on the wall. What it really matters is behaviors. And behaviors are driven by the DNA of the organization. So I'm sure Enron had a code of ethics, but it didn't have behaviors which corresponded to those code of ethics. And many companies, many organizations, in all parts of the world, have codes of ethics which they don't live by. Values more describe the DNA of the organization and the guiding principles that will drive behaviors. But even then, not all companies which have a list of values live by those values. So the truly authentic companies are those that have values that everybody understands and lives by, and that guide behaviors, and a code of ethics that are drawn from those values and correspond to them, and that people follow because they want to follow it, and with the right prescriptions in place so that to make sure that you try and catch the odd number of people inside an organization that are not going to follow them. So if you look at the companies that we think about as really doing this stuff well, take Johnson & Johnson, right? They have a Credo. It's came out during the Depression. It was written by Robert Wood Johnson II during the Depression. They live by that Credo. They take business, that describes their values. They take business decisions by their Credo. When Tylenol happened, the company took the business decision that they didn't need to take because it's what the Credo told them was their values, and they were committed to living by their values. And that's a company that you think of as being truly authentic. But it's authentic because it knows who it is and it behaves the same way. Here's, I think, the thing about public relations, right? There's a lot of the term public relations and the description of the profession has become an ugly term. People use the term disparagingly, and they talk about us in disparaging terms. And why is that? It's because we've allowed that to happen. Firstly, because we've allowed people to get away from the definition of what public relations was, that your connection, your relationship with publics, and equate it to publicity. We should never have allowed that to happen, right? But then, inside the profession, if you can call it that, we've let people do bad things, and we've let them get away with it, and we haven't called them on the carpet, and we haven't stood up for ourselves. So when people talk about PR equals spin, equals lying, we almost never say, hang on a second, that's not the profession that we belong to. So so from that, I think that as a profession, we need to stand up more for who we are and what we do and the value that we bring. And when you think about Arthur Page, he represented those sorts of values. We need to do a better job of that. But then each of us as individuals has to be really sure about what do I stand for, what's my DNA, and do I behave every day when there's a gray area, do I take the right decision because it's the right decision? And if more of us were sure about that, I think the reputation of the profession that we serve would be much higher than it is today. And we have an opportunity to turn it around, but it requires each of us to take the challenge.